All right, so for today, first thing we're going to start looking at is what we like to call linked runs. Okay, so I think you talked about this is something that might happen from time to time, especially for your medical transport, your MT units. And we talked about a few things that have to be in place. First of all, those units have to be put on with a standard with linked run workflow, which I believe all these ones are, and then also we need this capacity in place. So let's put in a couple of calls real quick, and we'll say it's training. We'll go with short hop transfer. Caller will be hospital. Today's date, we'll say pickup time of 12:30, 12:45 appointment. Doctor's appointment. Priority, we'll say, actually wheelchair, right? Because those are your MTs. Service level, we'll do wheelchair, and fleet, we'll stick with training. Okay. Last name, we'll pick on the Duck family again. This time I type in the last name, and again, like we saw before, the system brings me my matching patients. If the patient is in the list and I want to use it on this trip, I will go ahead and double click that patient. The system will now add that as my patient record here to this transport. And we saw again, if we need to create a brand new one from here, it doesn't show up. Easy enough. Just keep typing it out, put in all the information, and when we save the call, the system will create a new patient. Okay. And our pickup location, we'll say we're going to pick him up from one of our nursing homes. We picked on a few of them a lot, but that's okay. Let's say Brookhaven here. And we're taking him to OMC for a doctor's appointment. And I will now save my call. Again, because it is a wheelchair priority, the system asks, do we want to set up a return trip? And yes, we will. He should be done by 1500. And we save. All right, so we have Donald's outbound and return. At the same time, we're going to have another call in here. Again, we'll go with the short hop transfer. Caller again will be this time I will say it's Ozarks Medical Center. All right. Pickup is going to be 12:40 for a 1300 appointment time. Problem again, doctor's appointment. Priority, wheelchair, service level, wheelchair, fleet. We'll stick with training. This time we'll go with our buddy Foghorn Leghorn. Remember when we created this patient, the system came in, we went in and created them within the patient entry screen, right? Because he was for an emergency transport. We edited that transport and then created the patient record from there. We put in that alert field on the patient record, and here we can see as we use this patient in future trips, anything we put in the alert, like I said, will follow that patient along. So good to see that there. We double click it, and in this case, our pickup this time will be, who do we want to pick on this time? Anybody else in West Plains? Yeah, okay, Lamplight Village. There we go. And again, for this one, for Foghorn, he's also going to OMC. And we will save. His return trip, though, is going to be much later in the evening. He's not going to go back. He's going to be there for a while. He's got a few appointments to go through, maybe. And so he's going to go back at 8 o'clock. Okay, so we have our 2 round trips in the system, one for Donald, one for Foghorn. So I want to get this assigned to MT1, so I will double click for Donald's transport, and we will put him on MT1 here. So again, our fleets mismatch because it's part of the MT fleet. That's fine. The run is the default fleet. Our training fleet, sure, that's great. Because the fleet's mismatched, the system wants to know, do we want to change the fleet association with the call from our training fleet to our medical transport fleet? And on your live trips, maybe that might be what you want to do. For us, I want to make sure that these calls all stick with the training fleet, so that's fine. I'll say no here. And so now MT1 is alerted. But again, both Donald and Foghorn are going to be going to the same location. Okay, they get picked up at 2 different spots, but they're both going to OMC. So I want to get Foghorn's pickup done at the same time. I want MT1 to pick up both patients. So I'm going to go ahead and take this call here. And again, I could double click it, or in this case, I'm just going to click and drag, in the other way of doing it, onto MT1. When I do, again, I get the little warning about the fleet not matching. So, yeah, we'll do the cross-fleet alert. No, we don't want to change the call's fleet assignment. Then, though, I'm getting another little window to pop up. In this case, it's popping up because the system wants to know if we want to link the runs together. Link this one for Foghorn with the one for Donald, meaning we want MT1 to pick them both up and take them both at the same time. They are now essentially going to be marked as the same, not instantly, but the same trip for that unit. And that's fine. So I'll say yes. So once I do that, here's where things get a little different. Notice MT1 is not showing me any specific run information. Right? There's no next stop. It doesn't even show me the current run, but I can see it has 2 runs that are currently assigned to it. Also, on the far left-hand side of MT1, I now get this little drop down, okay, this little triangle. If I hit this little triangle, the system then shows me the actual individual runs that MT1 is currently on, the one for Donald and the one for Foghorn. At this point, I can say, well, they're alerted and they're en route for both. So since both trips are going to be moved into the same status, if I double click on the main line for MT1 itself, I get my next step, my workflow window to come up, but it's a little bit different. Okay, since I have multiple trips assigned to this unit, the system is showing me both trips on the left-hand side, both trip status on the left-hand side, and their individual run information. Since they're both currently at the alert step, they're both highlighted in blue, and en route is selected as my next step. I want to move them both at the same time from alert to en route. Right? The unit is aware of them. They're going to do the pickup. All right, so I will process that. And at that point, both our main unit line and both sublines for my calls, the individual calls, move to the en route status. Yeah. So let's say we're going to be picking up Donald first. So again, I can double click my unit. Opens up my workflow. In the workflow though, while they're both en route, it turns out we're going to pick Donald up first, so I only want to move Donald's call to the at scene. We'll say that they've now reached at scene for picking up Donald. So I can say at scene just for this call by selecting it in the list, having at scene as my option, and then hitting the check mark or yes, enter is the same thing. And I see, yep, now MT1 is on scene for Donald's call, still marked as en route for Foghorn's call. If I double click my main unit again, opens up. And again, now notice since they're no longer at the same status, when they're both selected, I can't actually pick a next step because there are 2 different next steps, right? One would be at scene, the other is departing scene. So in this case, we're going to say we're departing the scene with Donald, and then I can process. One other thing, I'm going to close without doing this. If I just want to move Donald's call by itself, I can double click the run itself and just get that one run's workflow and just say this one's going to depart scene. So if I double click on the actual mainline unit, it'll give me options for both trips or all 3 trips, however many are assigned, to that unit at one time. If I just double click one of the runs that are associated with the unit, it'll let me just work on that next step for just that run. Okay, so again, a couple different ways of doing it. And here we'll say they're at 6584.2. Good. Okay. So, departing the scene with Donald. Now, though, they're going to pick up Foghorn. So we'll say for Foghorn's trip, again, I can individually select that trip and say they are at scene. All right, picking up Foghorn. And after they get Foghorn loaded, they radio back in. Again, I can go to the main line and just pick Foghorn's trip and say depart scene, or again, just that one individual trip. So we'll say depart scene here, 6586.7. Now they're both at the depart scene step again. Since my general status is back to normal, I can see my main unit itself is just showing the depart scene status instead of the dashes. And again here, once I get at the destination with both patients, I can double click. Since both is the same thing, at destination, I can process that. And then it gives me the mileage for the second one. Copy it over. And now they're both at destination. Okay. Oh, there's one thing just to point out, a couple things about our runs grid here. Notice in my runs grid, it's showing me my trips right now based off of the run number. So even though Foghorn's outbound trip is currently transporting and the pickup time was earlier than Donald's return trip, it's showing as after Donald's return trip in my list because it's showing by run number. If I want, I can adjust my runs grid, and this is one thing I recommend doing, by sorting by pickup time. So if I hit pickup time, it's now going to show me all my trips based off of their pickup time earliest to latest. So make things a little easier for keeping track of what's going on. Also in my grid, in my runs grid, I can tell I'm sorting by pickup time because this field here has a little triangle next to it. So whatever field I'm sorting by in my grid, I can tell because it's got a little triangle, and I know it's sorting in ascending order because the triangle point is at the top. If I click it again, it'll sort descending order, putting the triangle point at the bottom, so it shows my latest trips to my earliest trips. Another thing that you might want to do, something I like doing for mine, is moving this pickup field way over. I like putting it next to my incident number, actually my run number, so I don't have to keep scrolling back and forth to see when's that pickup. Right? You can do the same thing with my patient. I want to keep scrolling all over to find the patient. I can move that over, so I can now see the order of my columns is showing me run number, incident number, pickup time, patient, and I can move those. You can again customize it to make it fit how you want to use it.
And once you do that, it automatically saves that customization, right?
Yep. So again, the idea, I'm done for the day. Close out the application. Come back into the application on my next day on dispatch. When I get into my dashboard, yes, it'll save. It should. I'll double check, but yeah, it's going to save it as the last settings I used. In this case, pickup, run number, incident number, pickup time, patient, and sorting by pickup time.
Awesome.
Good question.
Then you broke it. So.
And then, yeah, you break it. All right. So there we go. So again, run number, incident number, pickup time, patient. Sorting by pickup time. Everything. So incident number, every single trip gets its own run number. We can see that. But trips can have the same incident number. And what I mean by that is, notice for Donald's outbound and return, the incident number is essentially the same thing, right? Because even though they're different actual transports, they're both based off the same initial call, right? So incident number is kind of the initial call. So you might want the incident number, that's fine. If this field you don't want, I usually don't use mine. And if there's this field or other fields that you might not want to take up space on your grid, notice each one of our columns has these little double arrows. If I hit the double arrow, it'll actually hide that column. And I can tell there's a hidden column there because I now get this, gray and white candy cane stripe, essentially, showing me that there's something here. And if I hover my mouse over it, I can hit that candy cane stripe. It shows, yep, I'm hiding incident number. And if I click on it, it brings it back. I might not want it. Okay. Any questions on customizing the grids a little bit, making them work for yourself? No. All right, last thing, I get this question from time to time. Some people like seeing calls in their runs grid until they're completed. Other people don't want to see runs in my runs grid that have actually been assigned to units. So if you right-click any blank space on your dashboard and then go here to Options, once I go to Options, it opens this little window with different things that I can do here. First of all, grid font size is right now set to 12. That's the default. If I think that's a little too small, I can always bump that up. And now I can see my text on my grids is bigger. Maybe not even big enough. Let's really maximize this thing. We'll make it 20. Ooh, nice and big, right? Or if I think that's too big and my eyes are good, I don't care what people say, I can still see. Whatever. We'll make it 6. All right. So grid font size, and I'll put that back to 12, is the text size within my grid itself. Hide runs with unit assigned. This is that one where if I put a check mark in here, notice those 2 trips, those outbound trips that are currently assigned to MT1 go away because I'm telling the system, great, fine, they're assigned. I don't need them taking up space in my runs grid. Okay. If I ever, I'll close this down for a second, need to edit one of those runs, well, again, I can always just go to the unit, either right-click the unit if only one run's on it, or right-click, in this case, this run, and I can say Edit Run. It's the same thing as I would have done before. I don't need it in my grid to be able to make changes to it. All right. So now back to my runs. So MT1, they were at destination. Will say that now they have both patients handed off to the nursing staff. I'm going to double click it since again both calls were at the at destination step. Complete's already selected. Hit enter. The calls themselves are completed. Since I was hiding them anyway, it's not like they're going to get them out of the runs grid. They're already removed because they were hidden, but the calls are done. MT1 goes back to being available.
Now, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
What does flashing mean on the units?
Okay, so flashing on the units can come from a couple things. First of all, there is the unit status time. So there's a setting in the configuration that says if a unit has been at a certain status, if they've been at scene, over, I think Charles was making some changes to that, but, we'll say if they've been at scene for more than 15 minutes, the system will make that unit start to blink, okay?
Okay.
There's also, and we can get this by going into our options, some of the other options in there. I have this disable unit blink from unit time and disable unit blink from status time. A unit time, there's an algorithm that goes in the back that says you should start blinking at certain times. That's one that tends to be a little more out of place, so that's why we have the check mark here. The status time, that's where if it's been there for a certain amount of time, it'll start blinking. But if you put a check mark here, notice ours stop blinking. And then this way, it'll still go based off that status time that's been set to say, hey, you shouldn't be talking to the nursing staff for 30 minutes. Get moving.
Right. We were just curious. I'm sorry to interrupt what you were doing.
No, good question. Good question. Some other things in here in our options. So besides the unit blinking, we have don't sync run and unit selection. So that's when I assign a run to a unit. Remember, on my units grid, it has the run field to show me what the current run it's on, and in the runs grid, it has the unit field to show what the current unit it's assigned to. If it's assigned, putting that check mark in there doesn't match. Doesn't sync those. Those don't fill in. Okay. Link check interval. So remember, if a call has been in the grid, and the pickup time is within, I think, 30 minutes is what we set up for you guys. And it hasn't been assigned yet, the system will start having the run itself blink. Same idea, like we saw the units blink based off status time or unit time. This blink check interval says how often the system should check to see if one of those things needs to start blinking. All right, so it basically is checking every 5 seconds to see if it needs to make one of these things start to blink. Windowed mode, this is where, let's do this real quick. Notice it right now, if I right click and say edit run, and we saw this last time. So again, obviously to make some changes to a trip, I can right click, I can say edit run, goes into my trip ticket screen. Here though, because the way the system works, the active tab is no longer my dashboard. Essentially, the system hides my dashboard. So even if, let's say, we talked about last time having multiple monitors, multiple windows, let's just pretend that my fleet selector was, its own window here on another monitor. The way the system works by default, as soon as I change the focus from the dashboard, notice all the pieces of the dashboard go away. Okay, because my focus is no longer the dashboard. What windowed mode does is if I put a check mark here, it takes all the pieces of my dashboard and essentially pops them into windows. So again, if I have my own multiple monitors, great way of going, because that way, as I move between, it's a little hard to see because this is full screen, but as I move between my tickets, well, if I have this on another monitor, it doesn't go away. It doesn't hide. All right, so I can still be in working, tickets, making changes, putting in patients, whatever it is. And as the focus of the application changes, the dashboard will always still be visible. Okay. And actually, let's put that back. Options. For us, especially on the server, it's not as useful because most servers only have one monitor. Let's close that down. Okay. Oh, I know what happened here. I had this open from the other day. Hold on just a second. Picked the wrong one. There we go. Right. Okay. So, good question. Any questions? And again, some of the custom configuration still, but also on how to do a linked run transport.
I do. I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you have, like, say you were doing the MP1 and you linked two runs that you sent out together that were transporting together, what if you have two runs for that same vehicle, but they're not going at the same time? Like, say the unit's already on one run, but we want to put it on another run while we're waiting on another patient.
So you want to stack runs, essentially?
Basically, yeah.
So remember when I did that, when I dropped the second run on there, it asked me if I wanted to link these runs together?
Uh-huh.
You would say no, and instead instead of linking them to take them at the same time, it would add the second run into the unit's queue, which is kind of the standard way for most of our units that would, to work that aren't on a linked run workflow and don't have multiple capacity. So we'll look at how that works in a second. But essentially, to get it to stack, to get it out of the queue, you would say no to the linked runs question.
Okay, and everything else would just be the same then?
And everything else would just be the same. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so good question. And like I said, that's the next thing we'll look at is stacking runs, but perfect. Any other questions there? Nope. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and put in another couple of calls here. And we'll go short hop, caller. We're going to pick on OMC. Still today. Time for the pickup will be 12:45 for 1300 appointment. Problem, doctor's appointment, priority. Actually, this one will go with scheduled, stretcher, and training. So we'll stick with BLS. All right, so this time the patient, last name is Mouse, first name Mickey. Don't have any matches, so we'll put this in 5/22/19/7. We're gonna go with, let's see. I know I picked on him a lot, but that's okay. Brookhaven Health. Back to OMC. Save. All right. And yes, we'll do return. Maybe we're not sure when he's going to be ready. That's fine. We'll leave the 2359 in. So we have Mickey's call. And let's say, we have Mickey's call. And at the same time, we know after Mickey gets done, Donald will be ready pretty soon after that. So we want one unit to drop Mickey off and then wait for Donald to finish and take Donald home. Okay? And that lucky unit today, we'll say, is SH5. So again, a couple ways. I can double click like we saw, open up my alert units window, or again, click and drag. So in this case, we'll just put it down on unit 5. And so now we get the little warning saying that the unit's an ALS unit that runs a BLS run. Are we sure we want to do this cross service level assignment? Yes, we do. And voila, SH1 is alerted. They're en route. Okay, they radio back there en route. At the same time, we know we want SH1 to take Donald back. So again, I can double click the run. Opens up my alert unit window. I initially see my available units. SH1 is not there because SH1 is on a transport. Since it's actually transporting, it's in the en route step. That status is considered a unavailable status. So I can, though, go to my unavailable units and select SH1 here. Or same thing, I can click and drag Donald's call onto SH1 as well. Again, because the service level of the call is wheelchair and the unit service level is ALS, it's saying, am I sure I want to do this? Again, you might not, but for the example, we'll say yes for now. And then it tells me SH1 is already on a trip. Do I want to add this call into its queue? And I'll say yes. Okay. Again, on our first example with MT1, when we added that second call, it asked us if we wanted to link the runs. We said yes. If we had said no, it would have then asked us that question if we wanted to put that second run into the unit's queue. Here, because SH1 has not been set as being able to do linked runs, it just immediately jumps to the question about putting the trip in the unit's queue. Okay. So when I do that, I can see Donald's call also goes away because we said, hide calls that have been assigned to units. So Donald's call has now been assigned to the unit, even though right now we're on our way to picking up Mickey. If I want to see what calls are in a unit's queue, I can always right-click the unit and say runs in queue. And it shows me here are the trips that are currently sitting in that unit's queue. So now we can finish taking Mickey. Is that scene? We'll say departing the scene. Right around the corner there, and they're very efficient at destination. And then finally, once they're at destination, they are completed on this call for Mickey, so I'll mark them as complete. Notice they go initially to available and then immediately to the alert because the system knows that they had another call stacked on its queue. So as soon as it finishes the first call, the system automatically moves them to the alert status for their next transport. Okay. So again, two different ways of doing it. If a unit has been put on with a linked runs workflow, standard linked runs, as well as it having a capacity of over 1 and greater than 1, like MT1 had 3, I can do linked runs where I assign one call, then I assign the other call, and say, yes, I want to link runs, and like we saw, we can walk them both calls through the steps at the same time. This time, we had 2 calls we wanted to assign to one unit. Wasn't set up to be a linked runs unit, so instead it put that second call into the unit's queue. As soon as we're done transporting the first call, the system automatically essentially alerts the unit to the second call. Any questions on those two steps? Okay. Next thing. So SH1, they are alerted. Well, they just dropped off at the same spot as the pickup for Donald, so they're already there. So they're going to say we're going to have them en route and actually even on scene. So I'll just walk them right to that on scene step. Awesome. Now, once they're on scene, they start walking around, looking around, talking to the nursing staff, trying to find out where Donald is, what's, his current situation. Is he done with his appointments yet? What's going on? Turns out as they start talking to the hospital staff, they find out, lo and behold, Donald is no longer there. He's already gone home, right? Maybe, Daisy picked him up and took him to lunch, so he doesn't actually need the transport. He's not even there for the transport. So we have a unit that's currently assigned this call, but the call is no longer going to be transported. So we need to cancel this transport. Okay. So the way we cancel a transport, when the run is already assigned to a unit, well, I'm going to open up the unit's workflow. So let me go ahead and double click SH1 to get to its workflow. When a unit is on a trip, the fourth option from the top, no matter what status it is, alert, en route, at scene, depart scene, at destination, the fourth from the top is always going to be the cancel option. So I'm going to select cancel here and then process. The system comes up and says, all right, great. Are you sure you want to go ahead and cancel this trip? Well, yes, I am. So I'll say yes. When I do, another little window pops open saying, all right, why? Tell me what's the reason we're canceling out. This is a required field. I have to give it a reason. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit this drop down, and I'm going to pick from these choices, and we're going to say patient not found. We can add additional note information saying patient went home with family, and then process. When I do, the system will cancel that call, mark SH5 as available to take another transport. So there I had a trip. It was assigned to a unit. The unit was actually in the process of transporting it. During that time, came to find out that the call no longer needed. We needed to cancel the trip. So we picked cancel from the workflow, picked our reason, and moved on. Any questions on the way to cancel a call when it's already assigned to a unit?
Are you going to discuss refusing care?
So yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, for an emergency transport, we'll cover that here in a little bit. But that's not this. This is an actual.
Cancels.
Yeah, this is a cancel. This is not a refusal. Okay. All right. Next thing then. So while we were doing that one, we also got a call from the hospital. Mickey here. His initial appointment didn't go well. They're actually going to be keeping him in the hospital. They're admitting him. He's not going to be going back to the nursing home, at least not today. So I need to cancel this trip out of my system. This trip has not been assigned to a unit yet, so instead of going through the workflow, I need to right-click the run in my runs grid and choose my edit run option. That will then open up my trip ticket for me on my dispatch tab, and in the dispatch tab on my right-hand column, I have cancel reason. So that little window that popped up with those reasons we could choose, same list of reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and say, where do I have patient canceled? Notice it then marks my call completed. I will then go to my notes tab, right? So I can add additional information. I always recommend whenever you edit, change, do anything with a ticket, always go into the notes, put in why you did it, because you know why you did it, but chances are maybe somebody else might want to know why too. So we can say hospital called and is admitting patient. Return transport no longer needed. Okay. I can then save. At that point, my call is saved. Close it down. Come back to my grid, and all I have left is that trip later on for Foghorn. Okay, so a couple different ways of canceling calls. First of all, if the call is already on a unit, use the unit's workflow, pick the cancel option. If the call has not been assigned to a unit yet, and it's in my runs grid, right-click the run, choose Edit Run, and pick a cancel reason. There is a third way of canceling. If the trip is, in a future date, right? So it's coming up, tomorrow, next week, next month, whatever it is, and they call and cancel that trip. There's another way of doing it. We will talk about that when we start getting into future trips themselves in a little bit here. Okay, but any questions on those two methods? All right, next thing. So far today, the examples we've been looking at, all essentially standard trips, non-emergency trips. Now we're going to look at what can happen on an emergency transport for those examples of refused, a patient refused or multiple patients on it. So we're going to go ahead, and like we talked about last time, we don't necessarily need to use the emergency call screen to put in an emergency call, right? The issue is the priority. So we're actually going to put this emergency call in right from our non-emergency call screens. We'll say this is ALS trip. Caller we'll say is patient. Defaults to pickup time, date of service, that's all good. Problem, we're going to go ahead and say accident. We'll add a problem comment of MBA. There's an auto accident. Priority will be emergency, right? That's the important one. Service level, ALS, and fleet will stick with training. Okay. Patient, we'll say we know the person who's calling is boop Betty, and her date of birth. Again, you don't need it if you don't have it, but if you get it, great. All right, she's been around a while. Next, again, it's going to be from a scene, so we'll say 5512 Main Road. West Plains, Missouri. And if I want, I can, again, it shows me what it finds this as. I can double click it, that works. Destination, again, it's an emergency call. We don't necessarily know where they're going yet. They need to be evaluated. I don't have to put in a destination, even though it's there on my non-emergency call screen. And I'm going to save. When I do, the system adds my emergency call right into my grid. I'll get this assigned out. We'll give this to 6. They haven't done much yet today. And 6 is alerted. Okay, not only 6 alerted, they're en route. Seen this before. And now they are on scene. And so 6 is on scene. They're starting to evaluate things. There's several patients that were involved in the accident. 2 in one car, 2 in another, one other, whatever it is. They've got the patients gathered up. They're going to be taking 2 patients, and 2 patients are going to go on their own. They're feeling fine. And maybe not fine, but they don't want the ambulance trip. So we're going to say they are now departing the scene. Again, the system wants to know where we're going. We can add Ozarks Medical Center real quick. Then, like we saw before, I get my depart scene step window to pop up with additional information because it's an emergency transport. First of all, how many we're taking? We're taking 2. Okay. How many patients refuse transport? 2 refuse transport. How many were dead on arrival? In this case, 0. And what's our odometer reading? 12.6. Okay. The problem was an accident. We'll say transport mode, land transport, and it is a service level of ALS process. Okay. So SH6, depart scene. So just as everything we've already seen, the process kind of remains the same. We're going to keep walking SH6 through though. So once they're done, we can say at destination. Put in our odometer. Now, because we told the system we actually didn't just take one patient, there's other patients that we took, it wants to know about the other patients if we have that information. Okay. If it's an existing patient, I can search for it. All right, so I can say the patient's last name was Duck, and it turns out Daffy was the other patient that was involved. You can select them, process. Okay. So they've got to the destination. They now have unloaded Daffy and Betty, and they are completed. So then how this works on the back end, because remember we had 2 that we took, 2 refused. If I go to my runs search, and I want to look for calls from today, all right, so I'll put today's date. I know that the priority was emergency. I want to find my emergency calls from today's date, and the calls have been completed. And we took several. I can see here, so here's some of the early ones you guys are playing with, but here are the ones that we just did. Betty, Daffy, and I have 2 additional ones for those patients that refuse transport. The way this works is the actual runs themselves. The first half is the initial incident number. All right, and we can see that matches the incident number here. And then there's a colon, and then for each patient, I get, Betty was 1, Daffy was 2, and the other 2 were 3 and 4 respectively. If I open any of these ones where the patient refused, I can see on my dispatch tab, this has been canceled because this patient refused to go. Whereas my ones for Betty and Daffy, they weren't canceled because they actually went on the trip. Okay. So the emergency transport, the big part there is when you get to the depart scene step, just fill in how many patients are going, how many patients refused, how many patients were DOA. The system will then fill out additional trips for every patient related and put in the appropriate information. Any questions there?
So when that creates, say you have multiple patients that the ambulance transports, when that creates the multiple trip tickets, how does that coincide with the ambulance side whenever they put in their trip tickets information?
Okay, so from the EHR side, what's going to happen is they'll just be, when they hit the CAD import button on their side, because they're probably going to hit that CAD import button before they even get to, the destination. They'll have the one initial trip that, you entered when you first put in the call. And they'll keep working on that trip. When you add additional patients from dispatch, it does not create any additional trips on the EHR side. They will have to, for each additional patient record they'll need to, on the EHR side, hit the copy record button on EHR to create a new EHR record for the additional patients they're transporting.
Okay.
So, so essentially when it comes to an emergency transport where multiple patients are involved, the connection between dispatch and EHR will create one trip on EHR, but any additional ones will not be created. They'll have to manually do that from the copy button on their side. Good question. Any other questions on that scenario?
Yes, on the PRCs, what if we don't transport anybody? Because it's in the destination tab, so, and you don't select a hospital, then what do you do?
So, right here. So we put in the emergency call, it's on here, they get to at scene, and everybody refuses?
Yeah.
So that depends on how many refused and how many patients you want to say refused. If you just want to have that...
Transport.
I'm sorry, what was that?
So you just put 0 in the transport and 5 stayed on scene?
Yeah, so you would still need, because again, the destination comes up first, so you still put in a destination. The destination doesn't matter. Well, you then put like the 5 that refused, and you save, and the system then completes everything because it cancels it because they all refused.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Other questions? No? All right. Next thing. We have one more call here today. Foghorn, his scheduled return time for his trip, the pickup was 8 o'clock tonight. We'll say he's done, so it's quite a bit ahead of schedule. I can, at any point, as long as the run's in the run grid, I can dispatch this out. I can assign it to a call, drag and drop, or alert run. However, if I want the pickup time to be more accurate with what happens in the, when he's ready, I can always edit the call. So let me close down some of these, and we got a few of these open real quick.
Hey, Travis, real quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any way we can turn off messaging while we're doing this?
Are they getting messages about Foghorn and Betty Boop and
Yeah.
what? those sound like fun trips to me. All right. Yeah, let me turn that off. Messaging. Oh, did you not give my? Let's see. Our ESO account, is it not part of the admin's account?
I thought I put you guys in there. I guess obviously not. Huh?
Are you able to get into the application? Because I can. All it is if you go into messaging, the messaging entry, mark it inactive.
Okay, yeah, I can do that real quick.
So, because if it's inactive, it can't send anything.
Okay, I'll go do that real quick.
Say, Donald Duck, can I get his autograph? Yeah.
Recalls. Ouch.
Yeah, that's fine. Close this one down. Okay. Any other questions? No. All right, so Foghorn, he's ready. Again, we can assign any time if we want that pickup time to be more reflective of when he really is ready, so it works for this one. Also, all those 2359s, which again, you can leave them in. The system doesn't care, but if you want it, the information taken more reflective of what's happening in the real world, you can always first edit the run, which again opens up our little run grid. On the dispatch tab where the pickup time is, I can just change this to whatever I want, or there's this little clock button on the far right hand side. It says set it all to now. I hit it and it will say what time is it, 12:52, and sets the pickup time to that. Save. Close, back to my dashboard, and voila, his pickup time is 12:52, which since it's right now and not assigned, it starts blinking at me because we're late for the pickup. That's fine. And we'll say MT1, they're taking Foghorn. Yep. Okay. Cool. All right.
Are you logged in as ESO user?
I am logged in, I believe, as ESO user. Let's see.
You're in admin.
Who am I as here? Hold on just a second.
I go to the top.
Oh, I don't understand that.
Go to the start and go to the very top left.
Yeah,
You
it's
see the three line? There you go.
ESO user.
ESO?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
And it's set as an admin.
Yeah, you're in my group, admin group.
Were you able to get in and mark that as?
Yeah, I got it marked, so we're good to go now.
Right, I'll check our account settings to see what's going on with that. Worst case scenario, I'll just explicitly give it to him. Is it? Do you know if that ESO user? I don't know. Is it a local? Well, you know what? Not worried about it right now. You and I can mess with that later. All right. So, next thing. So far, everything we were looking at, whether our first session the other day or our session today, have all been calls for today. Okay, everything we've done has been for trips of today's date of service. So we're going to start putting in calls for future dates of service and work with those a little bit. The biggest thing when putting in calls for future dates of service is that there is a date of service field on the call screen. Okay? So obviously I can do it from non-emergency. I cannot put in a call for a future date from the emergency call screen. So this would be a bad choice. Okay? Wheelchair. We'll bring up the wheelchair call screen. We haven't really used that one much at all. Let me go ahead and drop it over here. Just to see some differences, we'll go ahead and use the wheelchair call screen for this. But again, the wheelchair call screen has a date of service. So as long as we got date of service, that's the important part. So we'll say, yep, training company, call type. Since we're using the wheelchair call screen, we'll just, stick with wheelchair here. Caller will be Squidward. Here, callback number. If we want caller, we'll go with nursing home. Problem, we'll say dialysis priority, wheelchair, service level, wheelchair, fleet training. And we've kind of seen this before. Here, though, pick up date of service. Again, defaults to today. I can click in here. Let's say he actually needs to go tomorrow. I can change 11 or 12. Also, there's a calendar page. If I hit the little calendar button, it opens it up and shows me which the dates are. I can just click on the 12th. Voila. Okay. And pick up time. He needs to pick up at 0700 for an 0715 appointment. I have my notes. Great. Patient, last name, SquarePants, first name, SpongeBob. Obviously, I do not have anybody in with that name, so we will go ahead and just fill this out.
I'm curious, do you have kids?
Yeah, I do. But you know what? Total aside, I don't think my kid. It's a failure of me as a parent. I don't know if my kids know who Foghorn Leghorn is. They know Donald. I don't think they know Daffy. Those Looney Tunes have fallen the wayside. Those are for me. Those are my characters. But yeah, SpongeBob definitely has some fans of him. All right, so pick up. Well, we've been picking on Brookhaven, so we'll continue to pick on Brookhaven because now I know, or I thought I know their code. That's
BHC.
BHC. Oh, I thought it was so close. Thank you very much, Charles. BHC. Thank you. And then, again, SpongeBob needs dialysis. So we'll look for our dialysis center here. Perfect. Add that. Things are looking good. Going to quickly double check, make sure I have all the information I need. Yep, things are great. Save the call. Okay. Because we picked the wheelchair priority, the system wants to know, is he need a return trip? He does. He's coming back on at noon. Okay, so I can update that and save. When I do, great. The call has been entered, but I can't tell because that call, the pickup time, is outside of the lead time for my runs grid, meaning I'm more than, I think we said it's 12 hours ahead of the pickup time for his outbound trip. Since that call is outside of that lead time, if I want to see and verify and make sure the information, I can come to my run search here, and now I can look for trips for tomorrow. notice right now, this is what I was searching for earlier when we were looking for that set of emergency patients that we just did. System already has my search criteria in there, including complete. I'd have to remove this. One thing to point out, if you come into the run search and you were searching for one thing and now you're going to search for other things, instead of making all these different changes, nice thing to do, this little X on the right-hand side, clear selection criteria. I'm going to hit that. What the system does, it gets rid of all of the fields I was searching by, clears them out in my selection criteria. It does not, however, clear my results. Okay. The way the searches work, the results are always going to show you what the results look like based off the last time we searched. So the last time we searched, this is the stuff we were looking for. If I'm looking for something new, I have to put in my criteria. So I'm looking for stuff for tomorrow. I just want to see everything for tomorrow. And I'll search. So now it's going to update, and I see I got 2 trips for tomorrow for SpongeBob. One with a pickup time at 7, one with a pickup time at noon. All right. So just a couple things. Search, remember, clear the selections, gets rid of them. Putting calls on future dates. Need to make sure I'm putting it on a call screen with a date of service field. That's the big part. So if I'm swamped, if I'm busy, and I need to make sure I'm still dispatching out, MT1 for Foghorn, they're en route, they're at scene, yay. At the same time of putting in the call, I can do it from my non-emergency or my wheelchair call screen. There's one other call screen we haven't really looked at yet, and that is our scheduled call screen. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my scheduled call screen. Now the scheduled call screen, we briefly talked about this last time, but essentially it's not built into my dashboard, right? Wheelchair, emergency, non-emergency, those are call screens that are built right into my dispatch dashboard, right? So I can do things while entering calls. The scheduled call screen is its own separate tab, its own standalone area essentially in the application. So I can't just dispatch out as easily. I mean, I can always jump back and forth while I'm putting the scheduled calls in. However, the reason we have it here is if I am just focused on entering transports, especially transports for future dates, this scheduled call screen is designed to help me with that in many ways. First of all, the layout, a little different at the top, right? Header section is not the same, but it flows a little bit better when I'm looking and uses the whole screen a little bit better than just my regular call screens. But the other thing that really makes this scheduled call screen very nice is this search section that's built into it. It should look familiar. It's the exact same as my run search. So my scheduled call screen has the run search built into it. The reason that can be so useful is if I have somebody calling and saying, hey, I need to, somebody to go to dialysis again on Friday morning, and you picked up at 8. What's your availability? I can right away say, oh, well, let me see here. I'll tell you. Friday. What are we looking like for Friday? I got a couple calls, but, 8's still open. Sure, we can go ahead and take that transport, and I can start entering it. Okay, so having the run search lets me look at what's coming up on a certain day while I'm trying to enter the call. Right. So here now we can just start filling out like we did before. Here I start with the call type. Caller, give me the name. Caller is coming from we'll say patient, and patient's calling, seeing if we can take him to dialysis. Referred by as if they're being referred to us by any physician that we're aware of. We can put that in. Date of service, again, I have a date of service field, so I can pick a future date. We'll say the 12th. Pickup time, we'll say, is going to be for, like I said, 0800. They have an 8:30 appointment. And then here's where another spot where this scheduled call screen is a little bit different than our other call screens. On our other call screens, the patient section, it was a built-in module essentially that lets us do the search and the results right there. Here, this patient field is if I know the actual patient record, I can put that in there, patient ID number. Okay. If I don't, then I can hit my little search icon, the magnifying glass, and do a patient search. And again, we saw how this worked. So here we'll say the patient's first name starts with M-A-R. As I start typing in, it starts to narrow down patients with that M-A-R. Am I seeing it? Not yet. I'll keep typing. First name Marvin, last name Martian. He was always my favorite. All right, so I do not have a Marvin the Martian patient in my system. Well, darn. So we saw this before. We can always create it right from here with this Add New button. So I'm going to hit the Add New button, and it gets me my patient entry screen. We kind of saw this last time a little bit, so we just need to add another patient record, in this case for Marvin the Martian. You can also get here by just hitting this patient entry button. But the nice thing is if I do it from my call screen, when I save this, we'll see it pulls that patient record right back into the call for me. That's fine. So say Marvin the Martian. I'm not going to worry about any of this stuff. He's made up anyway. We'll say he's 200. He's a Martian. He can be 218. Gender, definitely, we'll say unknown. Marital status, also unknown. Again, this stuff on the right has a lot more to do with billing. Although alert, like we saw, we'll throw this in here, has fascination with TNT. Always important to know the patients that like to blow stuff up. All right. Next, contact. So we'll say his address is 55 Moonlander Way. And it was 65755?
65775.
775. Oh, so close.
Getting closer.
I'll figure it out eventually. Delete. Tab, West Plains. All right, there we go. And as we saw, default home address, great. Mailing, yes, his mail will go there, and we can add any phone information we have. Okay. I got his information and the rest of the stuff. Payers, don't worry about it. That's from the billing perspective. Same thing, signatures, forms. We got what we need from the dispatch side. We'll walk the billers through the other stuff when we have those billing calls. All right, so I got my patient. I saved him. Close it down. Again, the system pulls that patient information. Anything in the alert section follows him right along. Fantastic. Okay. Pick up resource. So again, if he's at a facility, Brookhaven, who we've been picking on, or any of the other facilities that are in the system, any other resources, I can put in the code if I know it, or I can search for it. If he's not at a facility, we'll say Marvin again, he's at his home address, I can then hit this Use Patient Address button, and the system will go into the patient record, see what's been marked as default, and pull that in this case, for the pickup address. Okay. So if you have the patient's contact, if you have their home address, you can always use it here. All right. Otherwise, again, if they're at a location, if they're at a resource, again, especially just to make sure that from a reporting perspective, if I want to know all the times we went to Brookhaven, which for our training calls a lot, then we want to make sure we pick the correct resource here. Okay.
Now, it didn't pick his phone number. What phone number is that going to pick? Since you only added cell.
Hold on. This phone number actually pulls from resources. So
gotcha.
Whatever the phone number is on the resource record, since we didn't use a resource record, that's why there's no phone number here. Okay. One thing you can always do is if you put the phone number, you can have as many lines as you want as the alert section. You can always, so if you put the patient's phone number in the alert, you can find it quickly and easily this way too. Okay. And just type it in. Okay, good question. All right, so then he's going to, again, dialysis. So I didn't memorize that code. That was easy enough. All right, so I say we're heading to dialysis. Again, this is the bottom is essentially where the header section was before. This is going to be a training call. Priority is going to be wheelchair, service level, also wheelchair for our training company, problem dialysis. If you have any comments, authorization, caution notes. There. All right. We will then save Marvin's outbound trip. System comes up and says, all right, tell me about the return. Yep, we'll be taking him back. He will be done at 1300, and we'll save. Okay. So I now have entered Marvin's calls for Friday. Down in my search results, again, I'm not seeing them yet because I would have to hit search again. And now I get the updated information. Same idea for my run search. We created this call after the last time we hit search. I could just hit search again here, and now I'm seeing Marvin's calls. Okay.
Now these ones are scheduling for tomorrow.
These ones are scheduled.
Tomorrow, do they automatically hit the dashboard, or do we have to switch them over to the dashboard somehow?
So the way the system works is when I'm within 12 hours, I think that's what we did by the default, right, Charles? Was it 12 hours?
I think
So if I'm within 12 hours of the pickup time, the system puts it on the dashboard. So essentially, for who was this? SpongeBob, his 7 o'clock pickup will show up on my runs grid at 7 o'clock tonight.
Okay.
Marvin's will show up at 8 o'clock tonight.
Okay.
Okay. Good question. Good question. Any other questions? All right. Next thing. So, SpongeBob, Marvin, they are going to dialysis, and I think you guys have this with your dialysis patients. Your dialysis patients, do they go just once, or do you end up taking them over and over and over again on a schedule?
they're usually scheduled.
Usually scheduled. Or, and they're not just dialysis, but I know some like oncology patients, things like that. Basically, the idea is you might have patients that are going to be taking the same trips over and over and over again from now until, whenever. Maybe we know how long it's going to go, maybe we don't. So I want to use the system here to put in that recurring schedule. So instead of, every time we take the patient having to put in a brand new trip, I just want to put in one initial base trip and have the system use that base trip as the template for an entire series of trips. So to do that, again, I can do it from any one of my call screens as long as they have this set up recurring schedule button, check mark. Okay, so schedule call, same thing for my wheelchair call, same thing for my non-emergency call. Obviously, emergency call screen, not a great place to put up or set up a recurring transport. If you know you're taking them on the same day, same time, every day for that, heart attack, you're not seeing my air quotes, but probably not really an emergency call. Anyway, so we're going to do this from our scheduled call screen, since I've done a whole lot of calls in here. That's all right. We'll see it some more. So first thing when you're setting up a recurring schedule is just put in the initial trip. Okay, so we're going to put the initial trip in like normal. We're going to say we have a patient here who's going to be going to dialysis every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from now to the end of time, starting this Saturday. I mean, not the end of time, but as long as, they're aware. So we're going to fill it out like we normally would. So our call type is wheelchair. Caller name, we'll say our caller is nursing home. And the date of service, so again, this first trip is going to be for Saturday. So I will say Saturday the 13th and picked up at 0700, okay, for an 0730 appointment. Then I have my patient section, so we're going to say our patient here is not Marvin. Instead, we're going to pick on Foghorn some more. All right, so I got Foghorn. Double click him. And we're picking up Foghorn again from Brookhaven. I knew the code. And we can say the room. And then we're taking him to dialysis. And again, just kind of filling everything out as we normally would. Wheelchair, service level, wheelchair, problem, dialysis. Everything looks good. So I have my initial trip here for Saturday for Foghorn. I want to tell the system to use this trip I'm entering as the basis for a recurring series. So I put a check mark where it says set up recurring schedule. Okay. Once I've done that, I'm going to then save. I hit this check mark for save. The system, because I told it set up a recurring schedule, brings up a new window for me, the create schedule based on whichever the trip run number is. So now I can create a brand new call. All right, sorry, brand new series. First two fields when I create the series are start date and end date. Start date meaning when do we want the system to start tracking these calls to be created. End date, when do we want to stop creating the calls. The system will always, always, always default the start date to tomorrow's date. So since we're on the 11th, it defaults it to the 12th. Okay. I know Foghorn's first trip is the 13th, so one place that people get a little, can be a stumbling block, is changing this start date to match that first trip we just put in. That's not going to help you. Okay, if I make the start date the 13th, I'm telling the system start creating runs for this template on the 13th, but I already just created a call for Foghorn on the 13th. Okay, so by doing that, if I make that start date the 13th, I end up getting a duplicate trip for Foghorn on the 13th. He gets 2 trips to go to dialysis on the 13th. I don't want that. I already have his trip for the 13th. I want the schedule to start after the 13th. So the rule of thumb is put in the start date for the day after the initial trip. So since the initial trip is the 13th, put in the start date for the 14th. Okay, and I know we said he's going every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and the 14th is a Monday. That's okay. The system's smart enough to know that if I say Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and the start date's the 14th, I don't really want one on the 14th. I want one on the first Tuesday after the 14th. Okay, so end date then is 12/31/2099, which is computer speak for forever. So if you know what his end date is, you can put it in. If not, you can leave it as 12/31/2099, and the system will just create that schedule until you tell it to stop. Okay, so we'll leave that in there for now. Then we are taking him every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Turns out the system again will default the pickup times to the same that we did for the initial trip. We can leave that as is. If any of those days are different, maybe Thursday he's getting picked up at 0600 instead, I can update that to 0600 for an 0645 appointment. Once I have my schedule set, I can then hit my check mark. The system creates that schedule, and then it comes up and asks me about a return trip for Saturday, because when I created the initial call for Saturday for Foghorn, I told it to use the wheelchair priority, and the system knows to ask me about return trips when I use that wheelchair priority. So are we going to bring Foghorn back on Saturday? And yes, we are. So the system, defaults to the 20/59, which we can leave. If we know, he should be done, by 1300 on his appointments, we can put in 1300. Priority defaults to wheelchair, that's fine. I also then here have the set up recurring schedule checkbox. And again, the system knows if I set up a recurring schedule for the outbounds, chances are I want to set up a recurring schedule for the return trips as well. Okay, so we leave that check mark in there and we save. Because we said set up a recurring schedule for the return trips, I now get another recurring schedule window to pop up asking me about those return trips. And here, just kind of match it up. Same start date, same days I'm going, right? And then can adjust the times if necessary. If you're like me and you've been hitting the head a lot and you can't remember what happened 2 minutes ago, and you need to find out what was that start date I had and what days was I taking him, there's now this button here at the bottom, since he already has an outbound schedule, that I can see what that is. I hit this schedules already exist button. It shows me for Foghorn, the start date's the 14th. He's going every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Tuesday and Saturdays at 7, Thursdays at 0600. Great, so I can now match this up. We'll say it's the 14th. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And again, he should be done by noon on Thursday, since he gets there a little bit early. Okay. I can now save the return trip recurring schedule, and I now have my recurring schedule set up for Foghorn. Okay. We'll take a look at what this, what the runs themselves look like in the system here in a minute. We'll take a look at, editing the schedule in a minute. But in terms of setting up recurring schedules, you just put in the original one, put a check mark where it says set up recurring schedule. And again, the big thing is the start date. Always put it for the day after that initial trip. Are there any questions on setting up a recurring schedule in the system?
How do you cancel a recurring trip?
We will talk about canceling these trips here in just a minute, but yeah, we'll definitely cover that. Any other questions on just the setup there? All right, so I want to see these for Foghorn. All right, so I'm going to come back to my run search. And instead of looking for a specific day, I'm looking for a specific patient. Last name Leghorn, first name Foghorn. And I'm looking for trips that have not happened yet. So I'm going to make sure my completed checkbox is blank. So it's all trips that have not been completed. And again, since I'm taking him on that return trip today, the return for today shows up. But then I get to see his other trips in his series. I get the ones for Saturday, and then I get the ones for Tuesday, Thursday, next Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, the following Saturday, so on and so forth. Scroll all the way down. It's showing me all the way out till early 2019. Okay. And I know we said his schedule should go till the end of 12/31/2099, and it's only showing me to the end of early 2019. That's because the system, by default in my run search, limits the amount of results to show to 1,000. So if we're taking a patient 3 times a week, we get to 1,000 trips in about a year. Okay. FYI. But I can see these ones have popped up. All right. One thing to point out, the trips for Saturday, they have their own run numbers. After Saturday, everything has this star recurring thing next to it. The star recurring is what's telling the system telling me that this trip is scheduled for that date, but it is still part of the template, meaning any changes I make change the entire template. It's not an actual standalone run in the system yet. The system will make it a standalone run when I get to, I believe we set that to be 4 days ahead of the pickup time. All right, so Tuesday's trips will get their own run numbers, become their own actual runs in the system starting tomorrow. That matches up on the pickup times. Okay. Until then, they're still based off of the template itself. Any questions on finding the trips in a recurring schedule?
Now, can you print those out?
Yeah, if you want to print these results at any point in time on these grid screens, so my run search is a grid screen. If you right-click anywhere on the grid screen, it opens up a little menu. Here I can print what I'm seeing on the screen, or I can also do an Excel export to get into a spreadsheet. But if I hit print, it goes and gives me this print preview to show me all the information that I would be looking at.
What about for a trip that's already on the dashboard?
That's a lot of pages.
I'm sorry, that kind of broke up. Printing from the dashboard, is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Yeah, let's finish here.
Can you print those trips individually?
Not
And the recurring, just the ones that actually have the run numbers?
So to print them individually, if I open up a run that has its run number, that's an actual trip. In here is a print button, and this will give me a on-screen display of what that trip information is. And that'll happen on any trip, whether it's one that's already been taken or one of these ones, it's going to show that report. And actually, you know what? Hold on just a second. I want to make a quick change. Give me a second.
And another question on those, we were playing with it today. How do you print, like if you write notes, how do you get it to print the notes also? Because our medical transport drivers, they use the notes to get certain information for their runs, and we couldn't get it to print the actual notes.
So were you putting the notes into the ticket, or were these test notes on the EHR side?
I don't know.
They're in the
From
ticket.
the ESO side, the ticket.
So the dispatch or the EHR?
The dispatch.
So that is going to be, let me fix a couple things here. Hold on just a second. There's a couple.
Like our EMT doesn't use EHR to enter their trips in. Our ambulance does, but not our medical transport.
And so they have paperwork that they have to fill out, and it has certain like logistic care numbers on it, and they have to have those numbers, and we put it in the notes, but I couldn't get notes to print.
Oh, I guess you can click notes and print that screen.
Yeah, but then that doesn't have all of like the patient information on it. It's just
Right.
put
It'd
in
have
the
to be
notes.
2 pages.
Give me just a second and I will show you how to do that.
I don't like these 12 o'clock starting.
I ate at 11:45.
I had a sandwich on that friend.
I'm not sure what to pay that. I go, was it one?
Yeah, looks so good.
You picked the time, not me. Told me I was so bad, I got some food. Should have provided food for us, Chuck. Come on.
Like his way of thinking.
I thought all mandatory meetings come with meals.
No.
Oh, got a little bread, peanut butter and jelly, so there you go. Straight jelly.
I just tell you guys to eat before you come, which, that's one of the things I say. Like this thing.
You know what else is good? A grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I toasted peanut butter and jelly.
No, you do it like you do a grilled cheese.
Uh-huh.
You just gotta be careful because the peanut butter gets really hot. But it's amazing. No,
You
it's
put-
good.
You put butter on it?
Yeah,
Well,
you
I
put
tried
it,
that
do
on
it just like a
grandkids.
grilled cheese. You put butter on the outside, peanut butter jelly on the inside, and grill it like a grilled cheese.
But how do you keep from the peanut butter from getting
It's
all
gonna
in?
get all over your hands.
Yeah, I got a sandwich maker.
Oh yeah, or I can use my sandwich maker.
I had a really nice one until I moved.
Oh.
We got a nice little tree.
I just get calls. Does that make me feel good?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what's good? This is getting person practice time on the regular.
I love the routine transport.
I'm glad it showed all back in there.
I had a routine transport first year. I'm like, here you go. All the paperwork was in.
Yeah.
Make sure this works.
Little said
hey,
about what?
people.
About what? Oh, I thought you meant about moving the routine transport. I'm like,
Okay.
because like that routine transport, you have another
All right, so if I have a trip that I want to print the information out for, and you said with the notes, let's just add note here, patient first dialysis run.
No, it was off of the.
Oh, you might have to enter into.
So now if I'm looking at the trip and I hit this print button, looks like a little printer on a page, it's going to give me this trip sheet. Okay, obviously this one hasn't been taken yet, so none of the times come in. None of the unit information and the crew names will be here as well if it's a trip that has been taken. In this case, it hasn't, but I do get the notes section. Okay, if we look,
Okay, what about like whenever you do like a non-emergency just from the original tabs? If you go to the dashboard and then you click on like non-emergency,
So
and
pick up notes.
yeah, the pickup notes. That didn't print.
I can add that as well. I'll put that into that report. So the pickup notes will be.
Okay.
Can I edit that report? Because I don't like that Jeff bar on there.
Yeah, you can too. That's in there.
Okay. I just couldn't find it in the report section.
It's the. It's called. Just so you know, Charles, it is this one, Star Trip Ticket.
Okay. And that's under base.
Base, and then Star Reports. The Star Reports are the ones that correspond to that print button within the various modules.
Ah, okay.
Thank you.
Yep, cool. All right. Good question. All right. So, any other questions on our recurring trips that we just set up, at least to find them?
No.
All right, next, so this shows me the trips that are part of that schedule. If I want to edit the schedule itself, though, make some changes to it, under my Home tab, I need to get to my Schedules module. So I'm going to hit the Schedules button. I can do a search based off various criteria, a certain patient, when the start date or end date of that schedule is. Or if I just hit search, it's going to show me all of them. So I only have two. It gives me the two, the one that's the outbound for Foghorn, the one that's the return for the Foghorn. Okay. If, let's say, he's no longer going to be, at Brookhaven, he's changing nursing homes. So I need to change the pickup location on my outbounds and my destination location on my returns. I can hit this little pencil button here to edit the template. And that'll open up, it's the trip ticket screen like we've seen, but this is the trip ticket screen that will let us change the template itself for Foghorn's trips. All right, so I'm actually going to go to the Detail tab because that's where I have my pickup and destination information. Again, we're not going to be from behavioral. We're going to be a changing nursing homes. National healthcare. All right. So he's now going to be at NHC. Okay. So I'll save. And if I now look at my run search and search again to see the latest results, I see now for everything that is after Saturday, that's still based off of the template, it's NHC. Any trip that was based off the template but has been created, right, I'd have to edit individually.
But you'd still have to hit the return trip, right?
And now we still would have to, yes, fix his return trip so that the destination on the return trip is also NHC. There. Come back to the search, and now I can see pick up NHC, drop off NHC, all the way down. Okay. Also, if we find out, you know what, he's not going to the end of time, he's only going till the end of June. The other button here in my templates module, edit schedule, that brings up that schedule window that we saw before. All right, so I can change the end date from 12/31/2099 to 6/30/2018. If I try to hit my calendar page, not going to be very helpful because it starts me in 2099. Usually at that point, it's just easier to go put it in. Okay, so now I see that updates his end date here for his outbound. We'll do the same thing for the returns. Oops, wrong button. We want the calendar page, not the pencil. And 6/30/18. All right. So now my end date is 6/30/18. Again, in my run search, if I come back, well, it's still going out to early 2019 because I've not refreshed my results. So I refresh. Now you can see his last date that's listed is the 30th of June. And the very end, if it turns out, Foghorn is not going to be going to dialysis, we need to cancel his recurring schedule. We can do a couple things. One, If we change the calendar page to today's date as the end date, it gets rid of any trip that hasn't already been created based off the schedule. Okay? Or if we just want to remove the schedule entirely, so you might want to just change the end date if maybe later on he decides to, start up again. If you can just kick the end, change the end date again and have it start off again. Or if we want to make sure it's completely out of the system, I can edit my template and I can delete the template. Circle with the minus sign is the delete record button. When I do that, a couple things, whether it's a trip template, whether it's an actual ticket, and if it's a ticket, if I've actually dispatched it out, I can't delete it. If there's any dispatch information on the call that's logged, I can't delete a ticket that's got logged information. Here, template doesn't have logged information, so I can delete the template. Comes up and says, are you sure you want to do this? I say yes. It then thinks for a second and says, okay, that's been deleted. Now do you want to save your changes? So here's what happens. You hit delete, the system wipes out the record, but it keeps in the fields the information from the record. And so now it sees that, oh, there's information here that doesn't match any record. Do you want to save that? So it's kind of a fail-safe. If you delete something on accident, like, oh, didn't mean to delete that, you can just say yes, save here, and it resaves what you just deleted. Or if you really wanted it gone, yeah, just hit no, and then it clears out the fields, and you're all good. And then I'm going to close. Yes, I want to close the tab. Come back into my current schedule module, hit search, and that outbound is deleted. If I go back to my run search, all of the outbounds are gone, only the returns remain, which means I can now get rid of those return trips.
Now, when you get rid of those trip tickets, does it still save that patient information?
The patient information is saved. Yeah, the patient is a different record in the system. So we have trips and patient records, and you assign patient records to trips. So the patient record stays the same. This just gets rid of the trips that that patient was associated with.
That's nice. Ouch.
Okay. And again, we search. All gone. All we have left are the ones for Saturday because those are ones that were, not created from the template. They're already done. So if I don't want these trips, so again, we saw already, and one more thing, how to cancel calls that are already assigned to units, right? Open up the unit workflow, choose cancel. We saw how to cancel trips that were in my runs grid, but weren't yet assigned to a unit. Right-click the run, choose Edit Run, and pick a cancel reason. Here, let's say he doesn't need his trips for Saturday anymore either. We want to cancel these trips that are a future date, meaning they're not showing up on our dashboard at all. Right? So from my run search, I find those future trips, and then there's this button at the start of every trip that has yet to be completed called the cancel run. If I hit that button, I get that cancel run window that we saw when we chose cancel from our unit workflow, and I pick the option. I will say patient canceled, no longer going to dialysis. Save. And now we can see his outbound trip for Saturday has been canceled. Scroll all the way to the right. I see it is canceled. It's marked as completed because a canceled trip is a completed trip. Fine. And then I can cancel his return. Because I just canceled his outbound from the same window, the system assumes I must want the same reason with the same note, which is great. And then I can just save. And now that return trip for Foghorn on Saturday is done. Okay. All right.
Now, could you have done that to the template as well? Let's say they called and said, hey, next Tuesday he would.
So let's say next Tuesday or next Thursday trip, they no longer needed. Now we talked about how anything that was star recurring, I couldn't necessarily change just that one trip. It's still based off the template. So any change I did would change the whole template. The one caveat to that is if you noticed, every single one of those had a cancel button. So yes, I can cancel individual trips in the series. All right. So if he's not going next Thursday, I could have just canceled next Thursday's trip, and the rest of the series would continue on. Good question. Any other questions on, again, setting up a recurring series for a patient? finding the trips in that recurring series, or editing the recurring series. All right. Any questions on any of the things that we covered today, whether it be the dispatching linked runs or dispatching runs from a queue, queuing up runs in a unit, the emergency calls with multiple patients, using our cancel options, putting in calls.
Sure, but the multiple patients, can you send those to the directions to their Garmin, the multiple calls, through the mapping system?
It's only going to send the information for. Oh, so you mean like you mean the linked runs or the emergency calls?
The linked runs.
So the linked runs, anything that gets assigned to the unit will be sent. One thing about the linked runs that's a little different is if the unit is using that standard with the linked runs workflow, the system, because it's not doesn't know when to necessarily send what to which call, it won't send the message automatically. So if you want, so for those units with the linked run workflow, when you open up the unit, you're going to want to resend alert message so it sends that information to them. And you can do that for either both units at the same time or individually, right, using that sub run option.
So when you assign the run to this particular unit, then it automatically will send basically the coordinates to that unit.
So the alert message sends out information to an address associated with the unit for what the pickup location is, destination location, patient information, pickup time, appointment time, and any of the caution notes that you entered in.
I'm going to need help with, I don't know if you'll be able to help me or not, how to set those Garmins up now, because whenever we purchased the program, they said, oh, send the addresses and stuff to the Garmins, and I haven't seen how that works yet. So.
Okay.
And also priority dispatching.
Okay. I'll have to look at the Garmin setup and look at that workflow. I'll see what we can do for that.
Yeah, I don't know how to set the Garmins up as a. Yeah, I just don't know how to do that yet. So.
Okay. Let me see what I can find on that for you. But I'll get you that information.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other questions on the topics we covered today? There. All right. Well, that is again the long and the short of it. The vast majority of using the system. We do have another end user session call scheduled for next week. I believe it is. Let me double check this.
22nd, I think. Or the 18th.
I think it's the 8th. Yeah, the 18th I have at 11 o'clock. Okay. So between now and then, what we would like you to kind of doing already, get into the system, start testing out, put in a bunch of different test calls. If you can, one thing we do recommend is doing what we call dual dispatching. So if you're using your current system and it's not too crazy, pull up ESO dispatch, and as you enter the call into your current system, enter the same call information into our system and walk it through together in both systems. So you can kind of start getting the idea of where some of the differences are, get used to using our system. It'll make the transition process and the go live process a lot easier on you the more practice you can get in our system. And then on our call next Thursday, we're basically going to start that call off with a large Q&A session. Just see, what you've gotten by using the system, any questions, issues that came up, anything you want more clarification on that since you've been using the system at that point for a week or so. And then we'll go into a few other features such as working with some more patient records, some of the mapping things that we have, stuff like that. All right. Any questions on where we're going from here?
No, but I do have a question. Do you have, is there like a little icon or anything that we can click on to do like, that kind of gives us like training or test calls to do or anything of that nature?
No, there's no like auto generate run option. You'll have to put the runs in with the call screens.
Okay.
That's where you enter.
Yeah, and again, that's why if you're doing it, at the same time as with your other system for the live calls and put them into our system, it makes it a little easier for generating.
If there's like a training module thing we could use or something other than just entering, or trying to make a mock call on our own.
Just use the actual calls that you're putting in there.
Well, I'm saying during our 6 hours at minimum of having to come in and do it, other than us just thinking of calls to make
Kick
stuff.
with Tressa out and actually sit there next to whoever's dispatcher. You do the mock calls. And then the next day you come in, you can dispatch for them so they can get their 6 hours in to
I'm not
do the
so
mock
sure
calls.
she'll like that one.
Well, it's a good idea.
Oh, it's a good idea. I agree. I'm just not so sure I like that one. Getting kicked out of her station.
And I will say one thing to keep in mind when you put in all the test calls, because we are, I believe, importing information in for your historical calls as well for the billing side. Make sure as you put in your test calls to use the training company and training fleet for the calls. That way they can, stand out and we can, well, basically, it'll make it easier. Yeah, it'll make it easier to clear them out when we're live if they're under the training company.
Okay.
All right, cool. Anything else I can help you guys out with today?
I think we might have been messing up whenever you've been in your call and truly reading all the messages that blocked up. Because if you don't, like whenever you enter it, put it in for MT, it'll ask you, do you want to cross it to change to a different company or fleet?
I've been putting everything on the training fleet.
I know, but once you put in, what was it? Like an MT,
Yeah.
whenever you change, Can you enter just a bogus call again?
Sure. Let's see. Type ELS, caller, hospital.
Could you make that, make it MT, wheelchair or whatever, it doesn't matter.
Okay. And yeah, that's fine. Priority, we'll go problem. Hours appointment, priority, wheelchair, service level, wheelchair, fleet, training, and let's go. Pick on Donald again. I'll have a couple calls today. And
Yeah, we have people.
go back and see. Okay. And we will save. Sure, we'll do the return. There we go.
Let's see all the fleets are on the training.
Other than MT1.
Well, he put MT1 in.
No.
You know where it pops up with the dialog boxes and it asks you, do you want to cross it or?
Oh, let's get MT1 cleared. We'll just say complete fill. All right, so here we'll assign MT1. So yeah, this cross fleet alert, that's because the run is part of the training fleet, the unit's part of the MT fleet.
Okay.
I
If
still
we
say
chose,
yes, and here then it asks me if I want to change the fleet association of the run from training to the MT fleet. And that's because the unit got put on as a medical transport fleet unit. And here if I say yes, it will change this fleet association of the call from training to MT. If I say no, it keeps the call as training, but the unit is still MT.
okay, that's fine. That's training company. The company, okay, never mind. I had something totally wrong in my head.
That, my day-to-day right there.
Well, as being the manager, it kind of was flipping me out earlier because we was doing, if they would have said yes or no and it changed the fleet, I was thinking it might have took it from the training company over into the MT or the ambulance. So they kind of freaked me out there for a little bit.
Gotcha.
Did you say you were wrong?
Yeah.
I didn't hear it. We're not recording this session. It's okay. Wait, we are.
How do you change the fleet status on the vehicle itself again?
That has to you have to that happens when you put the unit on duty. So we'd have to take the unit off duty and then put it back on duty. So we'll just.
Is there any way to, like in the on-duty tab, is there any way to edit like a crew member without taking them off of duty and then having to re-put everybody on duty?
So.
A lot of times we'll get people switch at 1900.
So let's say.
Or we'll get people to jump on other trucks because, like a transfer yesterday, we had 3 crew members go.
So yeah, so the unit's already on duty. We'll say this one's got Tommy and Brittany. I talked about this a little bit on our last call. But double-click the unit to open up its workflow. I have the change resources option in my workflow. And when I hit that, it opens and shows me the employees I have. Remember, ones that are kind of grayed out are ones that are on other units. Ones that are in blue, where'd Tommy go, are ones that are on this unit.
We change it until we change it back, right? Or is it just changed for one call?
It changes until we change it back.
Okay.
So like if I wanted to add Sean on this one, I could add him on this one, and he'll end up being on 2 units at one time.
What about on the on-duty tab at the top?
So from the on-duty tab, if I have a unit on duty, like MT1 here, with the wrong crew members, or in this case, no, I would have to take it off duty and then put it back on duty. So if I want to leave the unit on duty while switching the crew members, I'm going to have to do that through my workflow in the change resources option.
Okay.
Put all the trucks on duty with no crew members then?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can. That's fine. You have a few on that way already. Yeah.
Put them on the truck. Why would you want to put them on the truck? Because in every call, you're going to have to do that.
No,
Yeah,
not if you already have your trucks on duty, though. Can't you edit it from this screen and then that way you don't have to go to your on-duty tab and take it off duty and then put them back on duty if you're going to change your crew member? Like at 1900 every day. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But if you're changing a crew member at, like, say, 1900, you can change it from this. Can't you just assign your crew members?
Yes. That is the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at, was instead of putting crew members when you assign the trucks, each morning putting the crew members on the trucks.
Whenever you go to the on-duty tab, put them on duty, you will assign crew to that truck.
Yeah, because you have to do it every
Then
24
if you have
hours.
to make changes, you'll do it from here.
So that will register.
Because whenever you put them on duty, you only put them on duty for 24 hours.
Yeah. So that'll register the changes permanently onto the on-duty tab as well. It'll change it on the truck when they're on duty.
Or if the crew doesn't change for the full 48.
No, we don't put a truck on duty for 24 hours.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Other questions for him?
No.
We can discuss that.
Yeah, I think that was the only question on that.
Okay, yeah, any other things I can help you guys out with?
Not until we blow something up.
All right. Well, that's what this next week is for.
All right.
And if you do blow something up or you have any other questions between now and our call next Thursday, go ahead, reach out to me, let me know. I can get in and help clear up anything you guys have.
Well, if anything, it's self-explanatory, and you always have a back out. If you accidentally do something, you can fix it without it making the decision to completely go through with it.
Right. All right. Well, then thank you all for your time today. I appreciate it. And yeah, I look forward to talking to everybody next Thursday at 11.
Sounds good. Thank you, Travis.
All right, guys. Have a great day.
You too, Travis.
Bye.